Okay.
Let me give you another one.
Yes.
The one that is the most shocking one. It's called the once empowered, always empowered.
Yes.
Now,
That's
so what,
the mining.
so basically, I'll use an extreme one. Patrice bought the mines in 1998 at African Renewable Minerals. When he formed Arm Gold, and in fact, let's say that he bought the mines in 2002, the second transaction. They can still count it now, as if it was still,
as if it's a fresh flow.
Yeah.
So this is the reason there's no fresh flow.
There's no fresh flow, and that's very important, and that is the most important thing. So now they can still count it, and so Zodwa Nqubule, the previous BE commissioner, she said it's the equivalent of you have a board of 10 black people, and a board of 10, and 4 are black, and then the 4 leave the board, and then replaced by whites. And so there's now 10 white people,
right,
but you continue to count the 4 black people who left
that
the
were
board.
once on the board.
That were once on the board. So it's a bizarre system that we have to, in terms of the review of the codes, we have to get rid of this.
What was the logic?
It was bullying by the mines, let's be honest, yeah.
Okay.
And then in what you call it, so in finance as well, there's no incentive for you to replacement BE transactions. So let's just take these transactions in the banks. I think the first round one expired, most of them expired around 2015. So they can keep the points, most of the points, under certain rules. So the incentives to do another transaction are weak. So as you're saying, the flow of new transactions, you need liquidity to keep the system going. So that what you have is a few companies that are genuinely committed to the process. I'm talking about companies like Sanlam, which is done under Motsepe's ownership. They've done multiple deals.
Okay.
Companies like, I think Vodacom, MTN, they've done multiple deals. MultiChoice has done multiple deals. So many companies that are genuinely committed to this process. Exaro's, I think, is on its 3rd transaction. Okay. So some companies are committed to the process. They will do it despite that the law doesn't require it. Yeah.
These debt-funded BE deals.
Yeah.
Are you saying that structure doesn't work? And
if you look at I was talking about the ones that worked. So I believe that the most successful of all time was First Rand. It created about almost 24 billion rands for black shareholders. And it created large black companies like Women's Development Bank, Kagiso Trust, and I think, those black companies. Now, what was unique about that one is that there was a free carry. These are free shares that were given to them.
Okay.
And then Mahala, that reduced the average cost of capital. And because First Rand is providing most of the financing of its balance sheet, there was also a lower cost of capital. So
but there were covenants and all sorts of
but then the thing is, the share price did very well. It was a well-run company, but what you extracted at the end was 24 billion rands for black shareholders. But I do think that we have to talk about, and there was a discount as well. So there's a discount and a free carry. So those are some of the things that we should institutionalize into these structures going forward. Yeah.
Okay. How do you find this balance between what we call transformation versus new formations? And I'll tell you why I'm asking the question. I don't think we can expect that a minimal amount of white-owned companies can adequately satisfy the needs of the rest of the economy. I don't know if that's a fair statement or not.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. We have to set up new companies. You're an entrepreneur. You want some entrepreneurship.
Never mind new companies, new industries, new structures versus this expectation that these 40 companies must
on the JSE.
Must 100%. Be transformed for the 60 billion.
Yeah. But now let's look
at... That feels like a misnomer.
Okay, when I phone the JSE now and again, I get it. I've got like JSE 1994, JSE now.
Okay.
It's not that different. All that's happened is that there were separately listed mining companies, which have now been consolidated around a few mining companies. Yeah. And if you look at what's new on the JSE, it's maybe on the banks, it's Capitec. There's Discovery, the collapse of private healthcare, of public healthcare, Discovery. And then you've got companies like MTN, these are new industries, and Vodacom. These are new industries that the government set up where you can put in empowerment conditions.
Wait, are you saying Discovery is a new industry?
No, I'm talking about the you remember the government provides a license, the telco license.
Yes.
MTN and Vodacom. Yes. So you can set up empowerment conditions for new industries, whether it's telcos or casinos or whatever. Yeah. So these are the new industries that came in post 1994. But the structure, more or less, when I look at the two Excel spreadsheets, if you look at it, it's barely changed the structure of this economy. And that's what we mean, that it is still highly concentrated. Somebody must do that study and find out so when I look at 96 and 2002, what grew? It was mining and finance. Everything else didn't grow. But within the other sectors of the economy, obviously something is growing, and you have to get Black people involved in those new things. And for example, we're now seeing renewable energy. I would like someone to fund a study. I would love to look into this because I can smell a scam there.
With renewables?
Yeah, renewables. I don't believe that there's genuine empowerment. There's supposed to be community empowerment so it's an invite to some people to finance me to look into these renewables, all the IPPs it will take 6 months. Yeah. But I'm just saying that I smell a scam, and I don't think there's been genuine empowerment that hasn't been achieved, but I don't have the evidence. But I can, I've been following these things.
Your intuition is telling
My intuitions tell me that have the people in the Northern Cape benefited from these renewable industries? This is a new industry like you're talking about here.
The solar farms and
solar farms. And why didn't the government, they're the only buyer of this renewable.
Right.
Why don't they take a free carry for themselves and set up a state renewable company? A state renewable company that keeps these 15 or 20% stakes for free.
Right.
Because you're the only buyer. You can do whatever you want. So why don't you put a 20% free carry for the government in all of these transactions? It makes no sense for me. Yeah.
What does that do? What does the 20% do?
Well, you must remember that it's a 20% of like in mining, in renewables, non-renewable, and many countries, they put in place a free carry for the state.
Right.
Yeah. So,
but the state still takes taxes on top of the free
carry? They take, like in Botswana, I did the analysis of Botswana. The state takes 80, with De Beers, they take 85%, 86%, yeah. The Botswana, when you talk about royalties, state ownership, everything, it's about 86%, yeah, that the government takes. Yeah, and then De Beers takes about 14%.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say, we are setting up a new industry. I don't know how much all these renewable companies are worth, but the government could be owning 20 or 10% or 20% of these new renewable energy companies.
Yeah.
So, and then Black ownership on top. So you have different layers. You could have state ownership, let's say 10%. You could have well, it doesn't create much employees.
Right.
Communities owning another bit and your Black shareholders owning more. Yeah. And you create genuine empowerment through this new industry. But we haven't done that. Yeah.
Let's talk about how entrepreneurs, small to medium enterprises can really make this work on the ground, if at all.
Okay.
The question I want to ask you, quickly, is if you had to pick one for the next 5 years, skills versus equity, what would be the biggest driver of GDP growth between those two things?
Do you know, when we created most of the values that I'm talking about, the 220, the economy was growing between 2003 and 2008 by 4.5% a year.
Yes.
So it lifts, it includes the it includes the performance of these shares on the JSE,
Right.
And some of them increased very high share prices. Yeah. So the question is again?
I was trying to
skills versus
So for the next 5 years, what will drive GDP?
Okay. Number one, if you had to put a gun on my head, we've got massive problems in South Africa, and I don't like, single solutions for massive problems. I believe in, you need to have multiple tools to address the multiple problems. And, I'm a big believer, as I was telling you, in universal basic income.
Right.
But the thing is, if you had to put my gun to my head, Ted, if you look at any random African country that is growing at more than 5 to 6%, which is many of them, what are they doing? I go and look at their investment rate. And the investment rate is usually they have a high investment rate, 25, 30 and more in Tanzania. So if you had to put a gun to my head, we must invest in infrastructure. Number one, we must increase the investment in infrastructure, physical capital. And what I don't understand is why has the government...
The ability to build infrastructure.
To build infrastructure.
So that's skills.
No, not this. So I'm talking about the money now before I get to the skills.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So this is the physical capital.
Okay.
So the physical capital, we have to do huge investments, and South Africans don't understand the scale of the investments we have to create to meet the unmet needs of our population.
Right.
So, so we have to invest in a lot of things. Like when I talk to the Department of Education, the school's backlog alone is 200 billion. Talk to the Department of Health, the backlog for health alone is 200 billion rands, infrastructure only. And I'm talking about people.
Right.
Yeah, so that's number one. So we have to invest heavily in infrastructure as a country because we've got one of the lowest investment rates. It's about 15%, 15% of GDP. We have to double that from 15% to GDP to 30% of GDP. And the thing I can't understand is that over the past 10 years, the government real per capita public investment has collapsed by 40%. And that coincides with the collapse of GDP growth to 0.8% over the same period. So we have to do that. Number two.
How do we double it? Domestic investment?
Mostly. So if you look at a random country, how do they finance investment? 90% domestic and 10% for FDI. So FDI is the icing on the cake. So that's number one. Number two, education.
Right.
And skills, So, I'm a big believer that we should have free education as a human right.
Right.
We must have free education from basic to tertiary. I believe in the cause of the fees must fall. And I believe that there's the postponed objectives of fees must fall. I did a calculation recently. To provide free tertiary would be another 50 billion rands. And so we have to expand. So just to give you an idea about what we're talking about, our tertiary enrollment rate is about 27%. In some countries, like in South America, I don't have it's close to 100%. Like in tertiary enrollment rate.
Okay.
In
like what, Brazil, Argentina?
Yeah. I think it's Chile, Argentina.
Okay.
It's above 90%, close to 100. Yeah.
Okay.
The most educated countries in the world, it's US, Canada, and Norway. So if we have to move towards that situation, I believe we must educate the whole population. We have to expand this education, let's say the tertiary education.
Right.
So I think we'll probably have to double the size of the tertiary education sector.
Okay.
We've got currently enrollment of about 1.6 million tertiary and TVET. We probably have to double that.
Yeah.
And I'll just quickly talk about this, is that one of the successes of this country over the past 15 years is that the number of people who the bachelor pass rates have increased substantially. I don't have the number now, but it went to about 300,000. It's almost trebled since 2009. It's about trebled from 100 to about 300, roughly. And this last year, the first year intake was about 200,000. So there's theoretically about 100,000 people who didn't get into universities. Exactly. We can't allow that to continue. So we have to expand the education, the tertiary education. Yeah. So I believe that I hate this word, but it's called the economists call it human capital.
Yes.
I prefer to talk about human development, because I don't want to commodify
people.
Yeah, people and, human. So we have to invest in human development and infrastructure. Yeah. And this is what creates a country.
Yeah.
If you have to simplify what economic development about, it's these two tracks. Yeah, human development, which is what I'm talking about, education, health, social security, for people, and number 2, physical capital. So that's what we have to do here.
How much of the continent have you traveled? Have you traveled with that?
Well, yes, quite a few countries.
Yeah. What is one of the first things you look out for when you?
Is the investment rate. Investment rate. Like if you go to Ethiopia, I follow that country very closely. There's a miracle that's been happening in Ethiopia. Close to double-digit growth for 2 decades. Yeah.
I mean, though, at the most intuitive primal. I'll give you an example. Maybe let me just say, I people watch a lot. So whenever I go to a country, you go to the UAE, you cannot stop seeing cranes. Like it's just the whole.
That's in Addis Ababa. You see cranes. Yeah.
The second thing that I generally look out for is the rate of young people loitering. I don't know if you've ever noticed that.
Yes.
And you're starting to see that increase very significantly in South Africa.
Yes, I do. We've got a youth unemployment rate of 71.7%. That is untenable. We've got the second highest youth unemployment rate in the world after Djibouti. And I work for an organization called Youth Capital, and we do the youth unemployment numbers all the time. And there's 7.2 million young people who are unemployed. There's 9 million who are not in education, employment, or training. That's the seeds of a revolution,
Very much so.
And but anyway, so empowerment, empowerment, I believe in the broad-based definition of empowerment. It's about building human development. It's about, people must have opportunities to participate in the economy as employees, as owners of businesses, and through procurement and so forth.
Tell me, what is the most undervalued lever in the codes right now?
The most undervalued
lever in the BEE codes, and I think there's stuff like absorption targets, artisanal training.
The one that I really want to
export oriented SMEs.
I would want to see one. I think procurement can be the big lever, but we don't have good enough data to be able to see what is happening. We have to create opportunities for Black companies in these value chains. You can't have a situation where Black entrepreneurs, most of them, look to the government for, it's not sustainable. And you've seen a lot of, media coverage of the corruption in the government. People must have another outlet in the private sector. And when I look at the annual reports of the companies, there are some companies that are doing very well on preferential procurement. But I would say we almost need like a procurement challenge of the top 100 companies on the JSE.
But isn't that the problem? Isn't the problem the fact that we've broken the very thing that is meant to empower
the state?
Because no one procures more than the state.
The state,
And so if you're procuring on an annual basis 312 billion worth of goods and services, that is where, and this whole disconnect that we are creating as if it's wrong for SMMEs to do business with the state, I think is problematic because where you're going to grow your business is having a state machine that works and supports.
You were telling about finance before. I'm big on finance as well.
Right.
So if you look at the banks, according to Basel statistics, their total balance sheet exposure to Black SMEs, the reporting required by the Financial Sector Charter is 14 billion rands.
Okay.
That is about 0.45% of their total assets.
Cool.
I believe that we're dealing with racial profiling of Black SMEs, because this is cumulative lending to Black SMEs.
Right.
And I discovered once when I was speaking at the BASA conference, and I called it out, it includes your West Bank loans, which can't be right, your car.
For a car.
Yeah, for your car, So, and then the second one that shocked me, when I was doing my research for the Transformation Fund, Nedbank. What did they lend last year to Black SMEs? 200 million rands.
200 million rands.
Yeah. And what did ABSA lend? 200 million rands. This is 0.00 something % of their total lending.
To total lending.
Total lending, to Black SMEs. So they're the only two that disclosed it. The other three didn't disclose. So what I'm trying to say is that to get the system working, I believe we need a procurement challenge for the top companies. And they must disclose their procurement in detail according to the way that we will all agree on. and say that if we're at 10% or 20% now, we're going to double it to 50% or whatever. Right. And then on the other side, we must have a system to provide the financing to the black companies. And I believe that the time has come for, the banks are used to reporting on black SME finance and their targets in the financial sector charter, but we need to set up more targets that are higher for them to lend to black SMEs.
With that stat, you've walked me into the next point, which I was going to make is capital scarcity.
Yes.
So those are private entities. And so they are managing.
And then the government. Yeah. So that's a very good question. So when I was doing the study, so if you look at there's two financing gaps.
Right.
So the B financing gap I calculated based on that thing is about what is it? It's about 300. It's about 300. It's more than 300. It's more than 300 billion rands. I can't remember what the number is. Yeah. And then if you add the SMME one, it's 350. So the financing gap combined is about 700 billion rands.
Right.
So we have to get a whole system that provides funding to make those things happen. So in a normal country, it starts with the central bank. So the central bank must be able to provide, I believe, 3 windows for the banks to lend. They did it during COVID, by the way, but it didn't succeed, the loan guarantee scheme. So I would like to see 3 facilities, one for the banks to provide B financing. That's the first window, the developmental window, and some kind of guarantee scheme from the central bank. The second one is to provide SMMEs. Because when I added the...
Can you say more about, because I was going to ask you, you are very brilliant, because I've never seen someone get 3 questions ahead in a single answer. I was going to ask you about the credit guarantee against this whole capital scarcity problem.
Yes.
Because the reason the private banks are not lending to black businesses is because black businesses
don't have the collateral. Yeah.
Apart from the fact that they don't have collateral, they're seen as high risk.
Yes.
Right. So before you succeed, you're going to fail a couple of times.
Yeah.
They're not willing to pay that school.
Yes.
What does a credit guarantee?
Well, we provided a guarantee from the central bank during the COVID.
Right.
So they did, but it didn't succeed.
But they killed us on the interest anyway.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But I'm just saying that if you get everybody working, there's credit guarantees. The executive director of I was talking to someone from the CEDFA, sorry.
Yes.
And he was telling me that we must look into the Brazilian's national. It's called the BNDES. Okay. So they have a system where they have a credit guarantee for SMMEs,
Right.
And so we have to get the funding windows for SMMEs, because I was in China some time ago. I've been there a couple of times.
Yeah.
And it's monopolized by large companies. Mm-hmm. And when I was there, I think the second time, they introduced a scheme, a funding window through the People's Bank of China to the banks to lend to small business. So the cost of capital must be lower than it is now.
Right.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. So then we must look at credit guarantees as well to stimulate the thing. And then the last one is your microfinance, and that is where CEDFA works. So we must segment the market according to the B transactions, the big ones on the JSE, and then we must small and medium, which is the IDC, the National Empowerment Fund, and then the micro, which is the CEDFA.
Right.
Yeah, small enterprise development, whatever it's called. It merged with, and they've got a new name. Yeah. So we must create these 3 funding windows. And I've been arguing that we need to our spending from the state is inadequate, and we need to increase it to about 1% of GDP, which is 1.5% of GDP. Sorry, 1% for black SMMEs. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Is it inadequate or just mismanaged?
It's inadequate. Yeah, it's completely.
So the number is not even.
Okay, so let me give you the number. So CFA is 2 billion,
right,
that they disperse to about 70,000 businesses, roughly. Mm-hmm. The National Empowerment Fund is 800 million.
Okay.
So you can't tell me that is enough. So remember, this one deals with the micro, and 800 million rands is for small and medium enterprises. That is completely inadequate for all the. So the government must put more money into this pot, and then the banks must also put more money into the pot. So we must have a unified reporting system, almost like an annual you have it. It's called in the OECD countries. It's called the OECD SME Finance Scoreboard. Okay. So and it measures the contribution of the whole system towards providing finance for SMMEs. So we need that's one of the recommendations that came out of my report for the government, that we have to have a monitoring system so that we must know at any time how much is the system providing to SMMEs. And then we must also have some procurement challenge, because there's no point giving someone the loan if there is not a market. So it must provide access to,
for sure,
capital and access to market. And our economy is not growing.
Right.
So we can't create SMEs when the economy is not growing. So it must also be supported by a supportive macroeconomic policy that's going to start growing.
That's the infrastructure thing.
The infrastructure, the spending on education, and so forth. Yeah.
So are we measuring the wrong thing? And I made a note on it because when you were talking about it, if the KPI was the median Black household net worth rather than corporate scorecards, would be...
That's a very one. I'm going to start working on that. So the one that economists look at first is GDP per capita.
Right.
So our GDP per capita in 2024 was lower than it was in 2007.
Okay.
So that's GDP divided by the population. Okay. So our economy has not been growing in line with the population. And then we must look at, I will come back to you with a measure of wealth.
Okay.
And we have, but it's difficult. We have high levels of inequality. I think 10% of people, I think it's 90% of wealth. So, but we must be able to disaggregate the wealth statistics according to race, because we currently do have household spend. I think we have some of the income statistics according to race, but I haven't seen the wealth statistics according to race, because how does the ordinary person accumulate? It's through housing, it's through land ownership, it's through,
asset-based.
It's asset-based, yeah. So we should be able, and your car and whatever. So we should be able to provide, because there's a GDP per capita, there's incomes, and then we need to develop a metric of wealth, which I agree with you. And that one is the one that drives, that's how we're going to monitor in more detail inequality.
Yes.
That's how we're going to maybe implement a wealth tax. And we must know exactly what's happening on the wealth statistics, because the problem is that we don't exactly know what is happening. Yeah.